In 1721, a weary crew of pirates met a broken stranger in Kingston who spoke of an uncharted island stacked with abandoned treasure. They followed his directions into still waters where birds vanished and wrecked ships drifted like warnings. The deeper they sailed, the heavier the air grew, as if something waited just beyond the horizon. The stranger promised riches. He didn't warn them what guarded it. So before we continue, please make sure to leave a like and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. The year was 1721, and my hands were cracked from salt and rope when I first heard about the island. We were 3 weeks out from Tortuga on the brigantine Marigold, hull heavy with gunpowder and stolen sugar, spirits low from dull water and quiet seas. The days had passed without prize, only waves and the same worn faces. Men turned restless when there was nothing to fight, drink, or chase. I served as navigator under Captain Caro, a lean man with a scar that pulled one side of his mouth upward, giving him a permanent half-grin that never reached his eyes. He trusted charts and stars more than people. I trusted numbers and distance, and that was why he kept me close. The rest of the crew was the sort every port spat out. Rourke, broad shoulders and bad temper. Thin, sharp-tongued Mateo with quick hands. Bram, who prayed softly at night and hid it from the others. And old Finn, whose right leg ended in a polished peg and who spoke more than all the rest combined. We had taken a tavern in Kingston not long before this voyage, and that was where the story began. A man with no hair on his head or face had dragged himself onto a stool beside us, clothes stained with old salt and something darker. One of his hands was missing 3 fingers, healed over with rough, shiny skin. He asked for rum. When he saw our coats and pistols and the way we watched the door instead of our cups, he guessed what we were and leaned close. "There's a place off any chart you know," he said. "No flag claims it, no trade route goes near it. You won't see it unless someone points you the way." I remember the way Captain Caro turned his head, only a fraction. The room smelled of stale drink and sweat, but in that moment it felt still. The stranger traced a shape in spilled rum on the table, a crooked crescent with a hook at one end. His hand shook. "Why would we chase what traders don't bother with?" Caro asked. The stranger's throat worked. "Because there's more gold piled on that shore than in all these rat dens together. Chests split open and left to rot. Cargo from ships that never made it home. Silver, coin, idols, jewelry, cannons. All left lying where they fell." Men nearby pretended not to listen but bent closer. Rourke stopped shoving some poor sailor and drifted back to our table. Even Bram, who hated talk of curses, lost his usual nervous look and leaned in. "If that were true, every cutthroat in the Indies would be clawing for it," Rourke growled. The stranger's eyes went flat. "They were. Most never came back. I only returned because I did not set foot on the sand." He told us an island lay far out, past lanes I knew well, beyond a stretch of sea, our charts left nearly bare except for a few soundings and a crude note of shoals. He had sailed with a crew that chased rumors of merchants hiding plunder on a secret shore. They had found the place after following a chain of low, jagged rocks that rose from the water like broken teeth. Ships lay crashed in the shallows around the island, hulls ripped open, masts snapped. His own vessel had held back when the captain saw what waited there. "What waited?" I asked. The man stared at the table. "You will not believe me. I don't care if you do. I only care that you keep the bottle filled." He drank again, then spoke of something that moved among the wrecks and along the beach. He said claws larger than longboats scraped across wet rock. He said legs, jointed and pale, reached from the surf onto the shore. He said nothing about a head or eyes, only that wherever this thing dragged itself, men vanished. Boats sent to land never returned. Waves turned red, then quiet again. Old Finn had scoffed, though his fingers had tightened around his cup. "He's lost his wits and his fingers together. Some reef tore his crew apart and he gave the reef a shape in his dreams." Maybe that was true. It should have ended there. But the stranger produced something from inside his coat. A chain of worked gold, heavy and darkened with age, holding a single oval emerald. The gem caught the weak light of the tavern and held it steady. It was no cheap trinket. It was not carved in any style I knew. "Taken from the sand," he said. "A man threw it to me from a boat that never came back." Caro took the chain. Its weight dragged his hand downward. I saw his jaw tighten. "Tell me how to reach it," the captain said. The stranger hesitated. "I want passage, somewhere far from here. No share, just a place on the ship and food. You take me, I point the way. After, you never speak my name." We sailed with him 2 weeks later. Out on the open water, with port dust gone from the planks and only sea on all sides, the tale grew among the crew. They whispered of untouched wealth. They said we could retire, buy estates, drown in rum until our lungs filled. Rourke spoke of hiring a fleet of his own. Mateo talked of getting his own ship and never sharing spoil again. Bram only watched the horizon and rubbed the small wooden charm he kept under his shirt. I kept my eyes on the sky and the lines of the compass, but curiosity sat heavy in my chest. I had seen rich prizes before. None had fallen into our laps without a fight. An unclaimed hoard on a distant shore sounded more like a snare than a gift. Yet the chain with the emerald was real, and it did not come from any merchant I knew. The stranger gave his name as Jonas, though I doubted it was his first choice. He stayed quiet most days, sitting near the stern, back against the rail, gaze fixed on whatever lay behind us. He spoke little unless pressed. When I asked for bearings, he answered with short, clear directions. Turn half a point west at dawn, hold steady by this star when it rose. Avoid a certain patch of water that looked harmless but ran shallow beneath. He knew details no drunk should know. As we followed his course, the air grew heavy and still. The usual trade wind thinned. Clouds gathered in slow layers, dull and gray, without storm yet without comfort. The sea darkened. Flying fish vanished. No gulls followed us. Old Finn muttered that the world felt emptied out ahead of us. One afternoon, as I measured our position, I noticed something on the main chart. The space we moved toward was nearly blank, only a faint circle drawn by some old hand, its ink faded to brown. No label, no notes, just that thin ring. I pointed it out to Caro. He looked from the circle to Jonas, sitting alone nearby. He knew it would be there, Caro said quietly. That is enough for me. The crew grew jumpy as the days passed. We had no prizes to break the monotony, no storms to work through, only that steady, aimless feeling of gliding toward a place no one had bothered to mark. At night, dice games turned sour. Men snapped at each other over scraps. A broken mug led to a fistfight on the quarterdeck until Rourke laid both sailors out with one punch each. Everyone feels something, Bram told me one evening as we leaned on the rail. It is in their movements, short, sudden. They want to be somewhere else, but there is nowhere to go. I watched the line where sea met sky. It looked the same as always. Yet I understood what he meant. My own sleep had grown thin. I woke often with the taste of salt thick in my mouth, heart beating hard, though I could not recall any dream. On the 10th day after we left the familiar lanes, Jonas came to me at dawn as I checked the sky. By sunset you'll see the teeth, he said. What teeth? I asked. You'll know them when you see them. Once you do, there is no turning back. He'll feel you. He? I echoed. Jonas pressed his lips together, then shook his head and walked away. I did not tell Caro about that remark. I kept my focus on the tasks at hand. Still, as the sun rose and climbed, I found myself glancing ahead more than down at my tools. The crew grew quiet as the day went on, as if something pressed on their chests. Even Rourke spoke less, though his eyes were sharp. Late in the afternoon, when the sky had turned dull and the air had taken on a sour scent, Old Finn shouted from the bow. "Rocks ahead!" Men rushed to the bow, boots thudding on wet planks. I moved with them, shading my eyes from the low light. Ahead, a line of stone rose from the water. Each column stood tall and narrow, tops broken and uneven. They ran in a crooked curve across our course, their sides streaked with pale bands where waves had marked them for years. Between the nearest stones, I saw dark shapes drift and settle with the swell. At first, I took them for rocks. Then a mast came into view, its crossbeams snapped and dangling. A tangle of rigging hung in the water. Beyond it lay a hull torn clean open along one side. Beyond that, another. They crowded the gap, half submerged, some tilted, some nearly under. Old Finn swore under his breath. "Graveyard," he said. Caro stepped forward, jaw tight. "Helm, bring us downwind of those stones. Slow sail, I want clear water under us." "Aye," came the answer from the wheel. We drifted closer, canvas trimmed until it barely caught the faint wind. The usual rush of water against our hull faded. The sea here moved in a slow, uncertain way, as though the tides argued with each other. I watched the waves lap against the wrecks and saw no foam. The surfaces where wood met water had a dark sheen to them, too dark to be only rot. Rourke cupped his hands around his mouth. "Any colors? Any flags?" he called. "There used to be," Jonas said quietly beside him. I had not heard him approach. There were many. Time and him took them. Caro gave him a sharp look. You said you did not set foot on the shore, he said. I never said I did not come this close, Jonas answered. The nearest wreck slid alongside as we passed. Its bow was gone. Splintered beams jutted out, their ends worn smooth by years of wash. A length of chain still clung to the forward section, links thick with growth. No sign of battle scars, no shot holes or burn marks. It looked as though something had seized it and broken it apart in one pull. A few of the crew leaned out, eyes bright. Matteo pointed. There, he said. See that on the deck? A figure lay on its back near the shattered mainmast. Only the upper body remained. The spine ended in frayed cloth and bone above the hips. The skull stared straight upward, jaw open. Around it, seaweed had wrapped around ribs and arms, threading through gaps. Crabs scuttled over the remains, shells dull gray. They did not flee when our shadow passed, only moved slower. One of them climbed into the hollow of the skull and settled there. I swallowed. The air smelled wrong here. It held the usual salt, but beneath it lurked an acrid taint, sharp and metallic. It stung the back of my throat. Seen enough, Caro said. Rig a sounding line. I want depth under us every few breaths. We crept along the line of stone, following a narrow channel that Jonas insisted upon. He stood near the bow now, one hand on the rail, eyes fixed on gaps in the rock that only he seemed to understand. Old Finn cast the lead, drew it back, called out depth. It remained steady, but not generous. We had room, but no comfort. As we passed another hulk, its stern crushed inward, Bram made a sign on his chest. This is wrong, he murmured to me. Ships do not die in clusters in one place without a reason. We know the reason, Rourke said, overhearing. Greed and fools who cannot sail. Bram shook his head. There is more. I could not argue with him. The longer we moved through that maze, the more I felt watched. My neck prickled. The crew tried to keep their voices up, but talk felt thin and forced. We passed a vessel stripped down to its lowest deck. Only ribs remained, curving up from the keel. At each curve, marks scored the wood. Deep grooves ran in pairs, 6 to a side, evenly spaced. They raked from one end to the other with no break. Matteo ran his fingers along one of the gouges. His hand barely fit into it. No storm did this, he said. Jonas looked away. By the time we cleared the line of stone and wrecks, the sun hung low. Ahead, the sea opened for a short distance. Beyond that stretch, a dark smudge sat on the horizon. There, Jonas said. The island. You see it now. He was right. The shape did not match any I knew. It did not rise into peaks or cliffs. It crouched low and uneven with a rough edge. No smoke rose, no sign of habitation. Yet even at that distance, I could make out scattered shapes along its shore. More wrecks, I thought. More graves. Caro called the men together on the main deck. They gathered in a loose ring, faces drawn. The motion of the ship had changed. The swell felt shorter and jerky, as though unseen currents pushed from odd angles. You know why we came, Caro said. You saw the jewel that paid for this course. You have counted the wrecks we passed. Ships die here and they do not carry empty holds. That is the truth of it. We are close now. By tomorrow we can stand on that beach and take what others could not. And share their fate, Bram said softly. Caro ignored him. We have charts of nothing around us. No Navy cruises here. No patrol will interrupt us. Whatever sits on that shore belongs to us if we have the stomach to claim it. What took the others? Rourke asked. For once, his voice lacked its usual bite. Rocks and bad steering do not carve tracks in wood that deep. Jonas spoke before Caro could answer. You will not believe it until you see it, he said. I told you what I could in Kingston. I say it again. Something hunts here. It waits in the shoals and shallows. It can drag men from small boats before they scream. It can crack a hull. It does not tire. It does not leave when the storm passes. It lives here. Silence settled over the men. The only sound was the slow slap of water against the hull. Can it be killed? Matteo asked quietly. Jonas hesitated. I do not know, he admitted. I never saw any man try and live. Caro stepped into the center of the circle. Every port we have visited since we took the Marigold had dangers of its own. Soldiers, rival crews, gallows. We faced all that for coin that barely kept us afloat. Now there is a place where wealth sits in heaps. Something defends it. So be it. If you turn back now, you will return to the same lean life and the same thin spoils. If you stay the course, you may die. But if you live, You may never need to take another ship again. I will not force any man. Speak now if you would have me set a new heading." No one did. Men glanced at each other, then at the shadow of the island ahead. Wealth has a pull that fear struggles to match. Even Bram said nothing. He stared at the deck, jaw clenched. I felt a knot in my stomach that would not loosen, yet my own hand did not rise. I thought of the chain Jonas carried. I thought of years at sea, old age on splintered planks, and the quiet, pointless deaths I had seen in nameless bays. If something hunted here, maybe it could be beaten. Maybe we could be the ones to do it. Caro nodded once. "Good. We drop anchor well short of the island tonight and send boats at dawn. No torches on deck, no loud talk. Whatever lives there should not have long to listen for us." He walked back to the quarterdeck. Orders rang out. Anchors made ready. Sails came down. The Marigold slowed, then drifted. The crew moved with care, voices lowered. As the light faded, the outline of the island grew clearer. Short trees and low growth covered much of it. The beach curved inward in a wide bay. Broken masts stood at odd angles along the shore, rooted in the sand where their ships had fallen apart. I could not see the waterline clearly, but I sensed depth dropping quickly near the sand. We dropped anchor when Jonas signaled. The chain rattled through the hawse, then went taut. The ship steadied. The sea around us lay almost flat, with only small, irritating ripples. No wind tugged at our hair or clothes. The air felt thick, muffling sound. Night fell, but the sky above the island stayed strangely dim. Not bright exactly, but not as dark as it should have been. A pale glow seemed to hang over the place with no obvious source. It made my skin crawl. Men settled where they could, blades close at hand. No songs rose, no jokes passed between them. Even Rourke sat with his back against a gun, quiet, hands resting on his knees. Bram murmured over his little charm, lips moving in a steady rhythm. I lay on the deck near the rail for a time, listening. The usual hush of insects from a distant shore did not reach us. I heard only the occasional creak of timber and the faint tap of loose rope against wood. Then, from somewhere between the island and the line of stone behind us, came a sound I had never heard before. It started low, a dull scrape that ran through the hull and into my bones. It rose to a harsh grinding, steady and unhurried, like heavy joints shifting across rock. It stopped, then started again, closer. No one spoke. The sound passed, moving along some path we could not see. When it faded, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. I stared into the dark until my eyes watered. My heart hammered in my chest. I told myself it was only rock sliding under waves, only driftwood against stone. I did not believe my own thought. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and broken. I woke often, sure that something had bumped the hull, sure that something scraped the keel. Each time I lay still and listened until my breathing slowed. At last, a pale light touched the eastern sky. Dawn approached. With it came the need to move forward. The crew rose in small groups, moving slowly, shoulders stiff from the night. No one spoke about the noise we had heard. Men avoided each other's eyes, focused on belts, pistols, ropes, anything that did not require acknowledgement of the dark water around us. I checked the horizon. The island sat unchanged, still low and uneven, still carrying that faint, unnatural glow over its trees. Mist drifted near the sand, thin and restless. Caro stepped out from his cabin. He looked as though he had not slept at all. His coat hung open, and he held a spyglass in one hand. He scanned the shoreline for a long time. When he closed the glass, he said, "2 boats, 8 men each. We take weapons, rope, and nothing more. We land near that inward curve. The tide is slow there." Rourke crossed his arms. "We shouldn't split the crew." "We need room for whatever we bring back," Caro said, "and we won't lose men rowing." Jonas approached. "The boats should stay close together," he said. "It is safest that way. If they drift apart, it will choose the weaker one first." No one questioned what he meant. Matteo gathered oars with tight movements. Bram checked powder horns. Old Finn watched the water with a frown that did not leave his face. I loaded my pistol, then a spare. The metal felt colder than it should have. My hands were steady, but I felt a weight in my chest, as if some part of me already knew we had crossed a line we should not have. When the boats were lowered, the hull groaned softly, as though reluctant to let us go. I took the bow of the first boat. Caro sat near the stern. Jonas boarded last, settling beside me. The second boat dropped only a moment later, men climbing down the ropes with slow, careful steps. We pushed off. The oars dipped into water that felt dense, almost resistant, yet completely calm. The only sound was the soft pull of wood through the sea. As we moved away from the Marigold, its dark hull loomed behind us and then drifted into the mist. For a brief moment, I wished Caro had ordered all of us ashore, or none of us. Leaving half the crew behind felt like splitting a body at the spine. Jonas kept his eyes forward. "Follow the deepest blue," he said. I leaned over to check and saw what he meant. The water near us shifted from dark green to a narrow band of deeper color that traced a path toward the beach. It bent and curved in ways that made no sense, like a river under the sea. "How do you know it's safe?" I asked. "Because it is the only way that ever was," he said. "Everything else belongs to him." Caro heard that, but did not respond. He watched the island instead. As we drew closer, details sharpened. The beach was broad, with patches of smooth sand broken by stretches of jagged rock. Pieces of wreckage lay everywhere. Planks, broken wheels, sections of railing. Some barely stuck above the sand. Some formed piles high enough to cast shadows. The remains of a longboat sat overturned near the tree line, its hull cracked but intact enough to recognize the shape. Mateo whispered, "There must be a dozen ships worth of timber here." "More," Old Finn said from the second boat, which followed close. "Some of those pieces are older than any of us." The trees behind the shore were short and twisted. Their trunks grew close together, leaving little open space. The branches formed a tangled roof, blocking most of the sky. I saw no birds, no movement at all. When we were still 20 strokes from the beach, the water beneath us darkened, not like shadow, more like depth dropping away suddenly. I leaned over again. Something moved far below, a shifting, slow shape, too large to be a fish, too steady to be drifting wood. My stomach tightened. "We shouldn't stop here," I said quietly. Jonas nodded once. "Just reach the sand." The boat scraped bottom. Men jumped out, pulling them onto the beach. The sand felt colder than I expected, as if it held no warmth from the rising sun. Caro stepped forward first. "Weapons ready," he said. "Spread out, but keep each other in sight. We make for the higher ground beyond the trees. Jonas, you guide." Jonas pointed left. "There is a rise that leads to an old clearing. Some of the treasure lies there. Not all. Enough to see." Rourke lifted an axe and sniffed the air. "Smells like rot." "It's not rot," Bram said. "It's something else." He was right. The air held that same metallic edge we noticed near the wrecks, stronger now, almost like old blood, but colder. It stung the inside of my nose. We moved up the beach in a slow line. Sand shifted under our boots, revealing broken shells and thin splinters of bone. Some belonged to fish, some did not. Near the tree line, Old Finn crouched and pointed at tracks. At first I thought they belonged to some large animal. Then I realized they were too precise. Each mark had sharp edges, narrow at one end, widening at the other. 8 prints formed a rough fan shape pressed deep into the sand. "For the love of God," Bram murmured. "That is no beast I know." Jonas's face went pale. "This is where it drags itself from the water," he said. "It always comes up this slope, always returns to it." Caro's jaw tightened. "Move." We entered the trees. The canopy swallowed the light in moments. The air grew still, heavy, damp. My shirt clung to my back. The ground shifted from sand to soil that felt soft underfoot, as though it had been disturbed often. Fallen branches lay everywhere, snapped clean rather than broken by weather. Rourke nudged one with his boot and frowned. "Something strong walks through here," he said. Jonas stayed near the front. He avoided certain patches of earth, stepping around them with practiced ease. "Roots hide holes," he explained. "Some go deeper than they look." I caught glimpses of things that made my mouth dry. A strip of fabric tangled in a low branch, a rusted pistol half buried in the soil, a shoe still intact with no foot inside. I tried not to dwell on each discovery. The deeper we went, the more signs we found. Some looked recent, some did not. Caro kept a steady pace. "We reach the clearing," he said. "We take what we can carry. We return by the same path, no detours." Men nodded, though no one looked convinced the plan would hold. As we walked, I felt something shift in the air. Not a breeze, not a sound, more like a change in pressure. My ears rang faintly. Rourke stopped. "Did you feel that?" he asked. Jonas froze, his breath caught. "He knows we are here." Caro lifted his pistol. Then we moved faster. The trees thinned a short distance ahead, light filtered through. We approached cautiously, boots silent on soft ground. My heartbeat quickened despite my efforts to stay steady. The clearing opened before us. At first glance, it looked like a shallow bowl of dirt and stones. Then my eyes adjusted. Chests lay scattered across it, some open, some locked, some broken. Coins spilled across the ground in dull heaps. Silver cups lay tipped over. Gold plate glinted from beneath layers of soil. A long row of cannons lay half buried in the far corner, their barrels eaten by rust. Men gasped. Matteo knelt at once, hands trembling as he scooped up a handful of coins. "By all the saints," he whispered. "It's real." Rourke laughed low, almost disbelieving. "We're rich." Caro allowed them a brief moment to take it in, but his voice broke the stillness. "Gather quickly. No shouting. No wandering." I moved to a half-open chest and pushed the lid fully aside. Inside, I found bars of silver packed tightly. Their weight pulled at my arms as I lifted one. It felt solid, real, impossible to ignore. Then the ground trembled. A faint vibration moved through the soil and into my boots. Not fast, not violent. More like the steady, deliberate approach of something massive. It came from below and beyond, somewhere in the direction of the beach. Jonas spun toward the trees. "He is coming." The tremor grew stronger. A deep scraping sound echoed faintly. Caro raised his pistol. "Drop what you carry. Form up. No one runs." My breath tightened. I wanted to believe we could stand our ground, but something in that approaching vibration left no room for confidence. I felt the soil shift again, closer. Then the trees behind us moved, not swayed. Moved. Their trunks bent in slow, forced arcs, pushed aside by something large enough to part them without effort. Jonas whispered, "Too late." Branches snapped in steady intervals as the shape pushed through the undergrowth. I stepped back until my shoulders touched the edge of an overturned chest. My breath came shallow. The men beside me raised their weapons, but their hands shook. Even Rourke, who never feared any fight, tightened his grip on his axe until his knuckles went white. The clearing grew quiet except for the sound of trees being forced apart. The steady rhythm made it worse. Whatever moved toward us did not rush or hesitate. It advanced with calm certainty, as though it had done this many times before and expected no resistance that mattered. The first part of it broke through the tree line. A pale limb extended forward. It was jointed in 3 segments, each thicker than a man's torso. The end of it ended in a broad, curved claw that dug into the soil with weight I could feel through the ground. The surface of the limb was hard and dull, with cracks and marks that suggested age but no weakness. Another limb followed, then another, then a fourth, each positioned with deliberate placement. Men gasped and staggered back. Bram clutched his charm to his chest. Matteo covered his mouth with his hand. The body behind the limbs emerged next. It was enormous, far larger than any creature I had ever seen. A thick shell covered its top. The shell was uneven, with ridges and raised patterns that caught the dim light in muted patches. Several long spines protruded from its back, each one as thick as a mast. The legs lifted and settled with slow control, carrying the creature farther into the clearing until half its bulk was visible. The worst part came when it stopped. It lifted its front half slightly, and the shell tilted forward. Beneath it hung a mass of jointed mouthparts, each part moving with small, careful motions as if tasting the air. The grinding noise we had heard the night before returned in a low rhythm. It came from this movement. Jonas took one step back. "It guards the island," he said. "It comes to anything that makes noise or disturbs the ground." Caro aimed his pistol at the creature. "Hold steady," he ordered. "If it charges, fire at the limbs first." Rourke stepped forward half a pace. "We stand together," he muttered. I wanted to believe him. My legs felt unsteady, but I forced my stance wider and held my pistol up. The creature paused again, its limbs settling into the soil. Every joint stayed tense, ready. It moved one step toward us. The ground shook hard enough that several men lost balance. Bram fell to one knee. Matteo grabbed his arm and hauled him upright. Old Finn shifted closer to Caro. The creature moved again, slow, heavy, measured. "Fire!" Caro shouted. A crack of pistols hit the air. Smoke burst from barrels. The lead balls struck the front limb and bounced off. A few flattened against the shell and dropped to the dirt with a soft clatter. The creature did not react. Rourke roared and swung his axe. Caro grabbed his shoulder. "Hold!" he snapped. "We fall back, toward the trees." Jonas shook his head hard. Not the trees. The roots there are loose. If a man falls, he does not get up again. The creature stepped closer. Its mouth parts twitched. A long, thin appendage extended from under the shell, sweeping across the soil. When it touched a broken piece of timber, the wood cracked instantly. "Move toward the left path," Jonas said. "There is firmer ground." Caro hesitated only a moment. "Go!" he ordered. We backed away slowly at first, weapons raised, trying not to trip on the scattered treasure. Coins slid under our boots. A chest lid fell inward with a dull thud. The sound echoed in the clearing. The creature's limbs tightened. It moved faster. "Run!" Caro shouted. We turned and sprinted. The soil shifted and buckled under each step. Branches scraped our arms as we plunged into the narrow path Jonas pointed toward. Behind us, the creature crashed into the clearing, snapping chests like dry sticks. Men shouted. Someone screamed. The trees closed around us, but the noise behind us grew louder. The scraping of limbs against earth, the thud of its mass, the steady grinding sound. Matteo stumbled. I grabbed his arm and pulled him up without slowing. Bram clung to the back of Rourke's coat to stay upright. Jonas pushed ahead, carving a path between roots and low branches with frantic precision. The ground trembled again. Dust fell from leaves overhead. I risked a glance back. The creature forced itself between the trees, bending trunks outward. Its limbs reached through the gaps. Bark cracked under its weight. One of the limbs hooked around a trunk and tore it from the ground with a single pull. "We cannot outrun this," Bram gasped. "It is too fast." Jonas looked over his shoulder. "It does not chase deep into the island," he said. "It prefers the open spaces near the water. We reach the inner ridge. There it will stop." "How far?" Caro demanded. "Close," Jonas said. "Too close." We pushed harder. Branches whipped our faces. Roots dragged at our feet. The path narrowed twice, forcing us to shift sideways. The creature smashed through the trees behind us, but its speed slowed. Its limbs could not maneuver as easily in the tight space. Rourke turned and hurled a heavy piece of driftwood at one of the limbs. It bounced off. The creature barely paused. We reached the rise Jonas had mentioned. The ground angled upward sharply. The soil grew firmer. Rocks jutted out in uneven rows. We scrambled up, grabbing at stone and low roots. The creature reached the base of the rise moments later. Its front limbs struck the incline. Its shell scraped against the trunks. It tried to climb. The ridge slowed it. Its limbs slid in the loose dirt. It braced itself and pushed harder. "Keep moving," Caro shouted. "Do not stop until you reach the top." I climbed until my lungs burned. Matteo's boots slipped once, but I hauled him forward by his collar. Bram's breathing came in short bursts of panic. Old Finn somehow kept pace despite his peg leg, gripping the stones with practiced balance. When we reached the flat at the top, we turned to see the creature still at the base of the incline. It pulled itself higher inch by inch, limbs sinking deep into the slope. Splinters of rock flew as its claws dug in. Jonas raised his hand. "This is where it stops," he said. His voice shook, but he stood firm. "It has never crossed this point. The ground is wrong for its weight." At first I thought he was lying out of desperation, but as the creature strained upward, its weight caused the soil to break under it. Its limbs slipped again and again. It let out a low grinding noise that vibrated through the ridge. Then it stopped trying. Slowly it released its grip on the rocks. It backed down the incline. Its legs moved in controlled steps. When it reached the flat ground below, it stood still for a long moment. Then it turned, not in retreat, more in patience, as if it knew we could not leave the island the way we came. It moved back toward the beach. When the sound of its movements faded, the ridge fell silent. Men collapsed onto the stone around me, gasping for breath. Matteo sat with his head lowered, hands on his knees. Bram knelt with both palms pressed to the ground, whispering broken words. Rourke lay on his back, chest rising and falling in deep heaves. Old Finn wiped sweat from his brow with a shaking hand. Caro walked to the edge, staring down the slope. "We are trapped here," he said quietly. "The boats, the ship, it will wait for us there." Jonas met his gaze. "That was always the risk. But there is a way off this ridge. There is higher ground beyond the center of the island. From there we may find another path, but only if we move before night." Caro turned toward the rest of us. "You heard him. We stay alive by moving." I stood slowly, wiping dirt from my palms. My legs ached, but I forced myself upright. I looked once more toward the path behind us. The trees now stood bent and broken, marking the creature's trail like a scar. Its patience frightened me more than its strength. We began walking again. This time, no one spoke for several minutes. Only the sound of our steps broke the silence. The ridge ahead rose into deeper forest. The air grew cooler. The ground firmed underfoot. But the island felt awake now, and everything inside it seemed to listen. We moved deeper along the ridge, keeping a narrow line formation so no one slipped between the stones and vanished from sight. The trees here grew farther apart, though still dense enough to block most of the sun. Thick roots crawled across the ground in uneven lines. Some sections of the soil looked fresh, turned over as if something heavy had passed through days or weeks earlier. Every so often, someone's boot struck a buried plank or a rusted piece of metal. This place felt like it had swallowed entire ships and allowed their remains to rot quietly under the surface. Matteo wiped sweat from his forehead. "How did anyone ever make it off this island?" he asked Jonas. Jonas didn't stop walking. "Some reached the ridge, some reached the far cliffs, not many. The ones who lasted longest stayed together. They kept their minds steady." Rourke grunted. "Our minds are steady." Jonas didn't answer. He just kept his eyes forward. We passed an old campsite not far ahead. A half-buried fire ring, a patch of scorched stone, and the rusted remains of a cooking pot lay scattered around it. A broken cutlass hilt stuck out of the soil. The blade was gone. Someone had tried to survive here. Someone had failed. Old Finn paused and tapped the fire ring with his peg. "These stones were moved by hand," he said. 2, maybe 3 men. "Not recent," Bram said. He crouched and brushed dirt away from the stones. "Look at the moss on them. They've been here a long time." Caro gestured for us to continue. "We don't linger. We need distance from the beast's range." Jonas pointed ahead. "The ridge widens there. After that, the land dips and rises again. That rise leads to the middle of the island. If we reach it before dusk, we'll have a view of the other side." "What is on the other side?" I asked. Jonas hesitated. "Cliffs, sharp ones. The sea breaks against them, but there may be a way down if the tide is low." Matteo muttered under his breath, "May." Jonas ignored him and kept moving. The ridge sloped gently downward, forcing us to slow our pace to keep from slipping. Loose stones rolled under our boots. At one point, Bram lost his footing. Rourke grabbed his arm before he fell, holding him upright. "Watch your step," Rourke said. "Thank you," Bram whispered. We reached flatter ground after several minutes. The forest here felt different. The trees were taller, spaced wider, with their trunks straighter and thicker. The scent in the air shifted, less metallic, more earthy. It wasn't comforting, but it felt less hostile than the beach or the clearing. The quiet, however, grew worse. Old Finn murmured, "Not a bird, not a bug, nothing." "Nothing living wants to be heard here," Jonas said. We moved forward until we reached an open stretch of land broken by massive boulders. Some stood as tall as the Marigold's deck. Their surfaces were worn smooth, as if water had once flowed around them. One had a large cavity at its base. Rourke pointed his axe at it. "Something live in that?" "No," Jonas said. "He doesn't climb this far." "He," Matteo echoed, shaking his head. "We keep giving it the shape of a man. It's a creature." Jonas didn't correct him. Caro climbed onto one of the smaller rocks to gain elevation. We searched for a safe path. The ground should rise again not far from here. I followed him to get a better look. From the higher vantage, I could see faint markings in the soil ahead, deep grooves running across the ground parallel to each other. At first, I thought they were marks from dragged timbers. Then I saw the spacing, too wide, too straight, and no wood lay near them. Jonas stepped beside me. "Those are old tracks," he said. "Long ago. He used to come here. Maybe he wandered further then. Now he stays closer to the water." "That doesn't comfort me," I said. "It shouldn't," Jonas answered. We descended and pushed forward again. The land began to slope upward. The air thinned slightly. My shoulders relaxed, but only a little. The island's center wasn't far now. Jonas's pace quickened, and we followed. Then a distant thud echoed somewhere behind us. We stopped. Another thud followed. Slow, spaced evenly apart. The sound reverberated through the trees. Rourke tightened his grip on his axe. "It's on the move." Jonas nodded grimly. "Back toward the beach. It's checking the clearing. It knows we fled. It will wait." Matteo swallowed hard. "Wait for what?" "For us to go back the way we came," Jonas said. A chill crawled up my spine. The idea of returning to the shore felt impossible, yet the thought that the creature expected it made the island feel even more like a trap with walls we couldn't see. Caro motioned us forward. We keep going. If we stop, we die. We resumed climbing. The incline steepened. Roots formed natural steps here and there. Bram slipped twice, each time catching himself. Old Finn struggled but refused help. Rourke pushed ahead, almost eager to face something solid rather than the constant dread in the air. My legs burned. Sweat dripped down my back, but then the trees thinned again, and bright light spilled between their branches. "We're near the top," I said, trying to keep the relief from sounding hopeful. Jonas nodded. "We'll see the other side." We pushed up the last stretch until the ridge opened into a broad rise. A gust of wind hit us. Cold, sharp, clean. It was the first true breeze we had felt since dawn. We let it wash over us, grateful for anything that smelled like fresh air. We walked to the edge of the rise and looked down at the far side of the island. Cliffs stretched along the coastline in jagged lines. Waves crashed below, sending white spray upward. Several dark sea caves opened at the base of the cliffs. Scattered wreckage lay caught in the rocks. Broken masts, torn sails, pieces of hull that had become part of the stone over time. Matteo pointed toward a narrow path winding down the cliffside. "There," he said. "We can climb down." "It isn't stable," Bram said. "Look at the cracks." "We'll test it," Caro said. "If it holds, we go down. Once we reach the beach, we can circle around. The creature patrols the bay, not the cliffs." Jonas breathed out slowly. "This is our best chance." But the island didn't stay quiet. A faint vibration reached us from the direction we had come. Not strong, not fast, but steady. Jonas turned pale. "He's returned to the ridge." Caro drew his pistol. "We move now," he said. "No delays." We formed a line and approached the narrow cliff path. The wind pushed against us. Pebbles rolled off the edge and disappeared into the waves crashing below. Rourke tested the first step. The stone held. He tested the next. It also held. "Slow," Caro said. "One at a time. Stay close to the wall." Rourke started downward. Matteo followed. Bram next. Jonas stepped after them. Old Finn waited his turn, gripping the rock with both hands. I waited behind him. Caro took the rear. Halfway down, the path shifted under Rourke's boots. He froze. Stones tumbled from beneath him. The entire line went still. Jonas whispered upward, "Don't move. Not 1 inch." We stayed motionless until the rocks finished falling. The vibration approached again, faint but unmistakable. Jonas looked up at me and Caro. "We must go faster," he said. "If he reaches the ridge, he may try to find another path." Caro nodded sharply. "Move. Carefully, but move." We descended faster. My hands grew sore from gripping the stone. My boots slid twice. I steadied myself each time. Jonas guided Bram around a narrow bend. Matteo kicked aside loose rocks as carefully as possible. Rourke grunted with each step but didn't stop. We reached a wider ledge halfway down the cliff, enough space for all of us to stand without touching the edge. Old Finn collapsed onto one knee, breathing hard. "I'm too old for this. None of us are the right age for any of this," Matteo said. Caro raised a hand. "Rest for 1 minute, not longer." We stayed silent, listening to the distant vibration. It hadn't reached the rise yet, but it was close. After a short moment, Caro motioned to continue. That was when I noticed something, a faint line of wetness on the stone wall beside us. It formed a trail that descended past the ledge and vanished onto the lower path. Jonas followed my gaze. His face tightened. "That isn't water," he said. Before I could ask, he knelt and touched it with 2 fingers. He held them up. A thin, clear substance stretched between his fingers. "Webbing." Jonas wiped the strand from his fingers with a grim expression. The substance clung stubbornly before snapping. Even once it broke, it left a faint stickiness on his skin. Rourke frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" Jonas stayed crouched, eyes fixed on the thin residue on the stone wall. "He comes down here. Not often, only when something reaches the cliffs. He drags himself along the wall to check. The webbing is from him, or from something he uses." Bram whispered, "Then we aren't safe here." "No," Jonas said, "we aren't." Caro looked at the lower path. "We're too far down to turn back. We keep going." The wind cut through the ledge again, colder now, almost sharp. I didn't question Jonas further. His silence said enough. We moved. Rourke descended first, his boots scraping stone. He moved more cautiously now, scanning every surface. Matteo followed closely, leaning into the wall to steady himself. Bram muttered small prayers between breaths. Old Finn gripped each notch with his good foot and his peg, balancing with surprising skill. Jonas guided us with short gestures, warning us whenever the stone darkened or felt loose. As we descended, the webbing grew more frequent, thin strands on rocks across small gaps and sometimes stretched between broken branches wedged into the cliffside. None were thick enough to hinder us, but they marked a path the creature had traveled. "Keep your hands where you can see them," Jonas said quietly. "Some strands are older, some aren't." I nodded, keeping my fingers on bare stone only. The path before us narrowed again, forcing us into a single-file line. The waves crashed below, louder than before. Spray reached our faces in cold bursts. Up ahead, the cliff curved inward sharply, forming a pocket of shadow. Rourke stepped into it first. He froze. "What is it?" Matteo whispered. Rourke didn't answer. He lifted his axe slowly, switching his stance into something braced and defensive. Matteo stepped in beside him and sucked in a breath. Then I saw it. A man's body lay wedged between two jagged stones, head down, legs twisted unnaturally. The skin had dried long ago, pulled tight around bone. His clothes were little more than tatters. A rope hung from his waist, trailing off the edge of the cliff. His right arm stretched upward toward the wall, hand frozen mid-reach. A long, thin strand of clear webbing connected his fingers to the stone. "He tried to climb back up," Jonas said. "He didn't get far." Bram stepped backward. "We shouldn't be here. This place feels wrong." Caro kept his voice steady. "Keep moving. Don't touch anything." We edged around the body, close enough to smell the dry salt in the curled fabric. My throat tightened. I tried not to imagine the man's final moments, stranded, exhausted, reaching upward while something dragged itself down the cliff toward him. Once we passed the body, the path widened again. The sea crashed harder now, as though the cliff angle amplified the sound. The tide was higher than before. We needed to reach the bottom before the water rose further. Jonas signaled for faster movement. "We're close," he said. "The last section is steep, but it will get us to the rocks." Caro nodded. "Then move. We can't let night find us on this cliff." The final descent began. The path shifted into a half-stair of jagged stone. The handholds were narrow but steady. Rourke went down first and reached the bottom without issue. Matteo followed, then Bram. Old Finn hesitated at the final drop, but Jonas steadied him. I climbed down after them, testing each notch carefully. Caro came last. When my boots hit the rocks at the base of the cliff, I breathed out in relief. The sand was close, 50 paces away. The tide washed through gaps in the rocks, slowing only slightly before retreating. "We made it," Matteo said. "Not yet," Jonas replied. He scanned the cliffs above. "We need to cross the rock bed before the tide rises. The beach will take us around the island, but only if the water stays low." We started forward. The rocks were uneven, slick in places, sharp in others. Bram nearly slipped twice before Rourke caught his arm. Old Finn took careful steps, testing each stone with his peg. Jonas avoided certain cracks between boulders, warning us each time. As we made our way, the air thickened with the metallic scent from the beach. Waves crashed harder behind us. The tide crept closer. Then a sound rose above the water. A slow, deliberate scrape, coming from the left. Jonas froze. "He's near." Caro drew his pistol. "Where?" Jonas pointed toward a break in the rocks where a shallow cave opened. The mouth of it was low and dark. Thin strands of clear webbing hung from its edges. "He uses the caves when the sea is high," Jonas said. "He waits there. He listens." The scraping grew louder. We crouched behind a cluster of boulders. My heart pounded. The cave mouth darkened further as something massive shifted inside. Rourke's voice was barely a whisper. "We can't outfight that thing." "We don't have to," Jonas said, "but we can distract it." Caro glanced at him. "With what?" Jonas pointed to a large piece of wreckage lodged between the rocks near the cave, an old mast segment, thick and heavy. "If we push that into the cave mouth, it may block him long enough to reach the sand." Rourke didn't wait for approval. "Matteo, with me." They moved before fear could root them, gripping the thick timber and bracing themselves. I joined on the other side. The mast was heavy, swollen with water, but we forced it loose. The scraping intensified. Something massive pressed against the cave interior. "Now!" Jonas hissed. We shoved with all our strength. The mast rolled forward, slamming into the cave entrance. It wedged between the rocks. The scraping inside turned violent. The mast shifted but held, for now. Go! Caro shouted. We sprinted. The rocks shook behind us as the creature forced against the blockage. Cracks formed in the mast. The scraping became sharper, faster. I didn't look back. We reached the sand just as a loud crack echoed across the shore. The mast had snapped. Run! Jonas cried. We bolted along the beach, feet sinking into wet sand. The tide nipped at our boots. Waves washed around our ankles. We followed the curve of the island, putting as much distance as possible between us and the caves. I risked a glance back. A massive limb emerged from the darkness of the cave, then another. The creature pulled itself into the open. It scanned the shore, limbs planted firmly in the sand. Its mouthparts moved with small, deliberate motions. It saw us. Faster! Caro yelled. We ran until our lungs burned, until the waves splashed higher, until the beach narrowed again. The creature advanced behind us at a steady pace, unhindered now, moving with terrifying calm. It didn't rush. It didn't stumble. It knew we were trapped between rising water and solid cliff. Then Jonas shouted, pointing ahead. There! A break in the rocks! A narrow cut in the cliff formed a passage barely wide enough for two men. Waves flowed into it and withdrew. Beyond it, I could see higher ground. If we reach that gap, Jonas said, he cannot follow. His shell won't fit. We sprinted. The creature gained behind us. Its limbs sank deep into the sand, propelling it forward with long strides. The grinding noise rose, echoing over the waves. The tide surged around our legs. Water spilled into the passage ahead. Go! Caro shouted. Rourke entered first, forcing his way between the rocks. Matteo followed. Bram squeezed through next. Old Finn limped in with effort. I went after him, twisting my shoulders to fit. Jonas stayed behind Caro and me, covering our retreat. The creature reached the start of the passage. Its front limbs slammed into the rocks. Sand exploded upward. The ground shook. It tried to wedge itself in. Stones cracked, but its shell stopped it. Jonas pushed me forward. Don't stop! Caro squeezed into the passage behind me. Jonas slipped in last. The creature clawed at the entrance, widening the gap by inches, but only inches. We kept moving until the tunnel ended in a rise of solid ground. When we reached the top, we collapsed one by one. Below us, the creature watched from the shore. It scraped its limbs once, then turned and retreated toward the beach, returning to its territory. Patient, knowing we had not escaped the island, only delayed what it believed was inevitable. Caro stood last. We'll find another path, he said. But Jonas shook his head. There is no other path. Only night, higher ground, and a creature that knows every inch of this place. He looked at each of us, his expression hollow. We survive tonight, he said, or we don't survive at all. The wind shifted. The island fell quiet again. We stood on that rise until our breathing steadied, each man listening for any hint of movement behind us. The passage we'd squeezed through was now flooded up to the knees as the tide pushed inward, sealing off the shore from view. Only the grinding echo of the creature's retreat remained, faint and distant but unforgettable. The sun had begun its slow descent, turning the sky a muted gold that felt out of place on such a hostile island. Caro wiped his face with his sleeve. We hold this ground through the night. Jonas, you know this place. Tell us what we're facing. Jonas took a long breath before answering. He patrols in cycles. He controls the shoreline and the lower forests. At night, he moves inland. I've never seen him reach this far, but I've seen his old marks. If he wants us, he'll find a route, but he moves slower on higher rock. Rourke sat on a boulder, shoulders stiff. We can fight him. No, Jonas said firmly. Weapons slow him, but they do nothing useful. The joints of his limbs are too thick, his shell is too dense, even fire won't stop him. Matteo shook his head. So we're cornered. Not cornered, Jonas said. Just running out of places he doesn't own. Caro paced a tight circle. We survive tonight. At first light we look for a way to circle to the far cliffs. If we find a path down, we reach the water. A raft, driftwood, anything that floats. We push off and let the current take us. Old Finn exhaled hard. We'll be exposed. We're exposed now, Caro said. The light faded further. Shadows stretched across the rise, turning the ridgeline into an uneven silhouette. I felt the island grow colder. The air seemed heavier than before, as if the weight of night settled early here. We spread out, searching for anything that might help us last the hours ahead. The rise wasn't large, just a flat patch of stone surrounded by twisted roots and harsh grass. A narrow path sloped downward on the inland side, vanishing into thick trees. Jonas warned us not to go down it. "That direction leads to hollow ground," he said. "Old tunnels, caves, buried wreckage, too easy to fall through. He uses those places. You would hear him coming too late." We kept close to the rise. Rourke found a half-collapsed lean-to made from broken branches and a torn sailcloth nestled between two boulders. It had dried long ago, clearly built by some past castaway. Bram found a rusted lantern nearby, its glass cracked. He held it up. "If we could light this—" "No flame," Jonas said quickly. "Fire attracts him. He senses the heat." We settled into a loose defensive circle as darkness crept over the island. The sun dropped behind the cliffs, leaving the world tinted blue and cold. Caro ordered us to eat what remained of our dry rations. The food felt stale and tasteless, but it kept hunger from digging deeper into our nerves. Night came fully. The forest below us went black. No insects clicked, no birds called. The silence felt unnatural, suffocating. I strained my ears, expecting to hear the scraping of the creature at any moment. The first sound came from far off, a low, dragging thud. "North side," Jonas whispered. "He's moving inland." Another thud followed. Then the faint crack of a tree being forced aside. Matteo trembled. "He's looking for us," Jonas nodded. "He knows we're still on the island. He won't stop until he's searched every place he can reach." Caro raised his pistol, though we all knew it wouldn't matter unless the creature was within arm's reach. Even then, it might only anger it. The thuds continued, sometimes steady, sometimes pausing. The creature's roots circled the lower forest. Each time the sound returned, it came from a different angle. He was tracing a wide loop, closing it little by little. Bram whispered a prayer. Rourke nudged him. "Save your breath. If he reaches us, no words will help." "I'm not praying for rescue," Bram murmured. "I'm praying for resolve." Time stretched painfully. Minutes felt heavy. None of us dared lie down. The cold air crawled through our clothes, making our joints stiff. Then the creature stopped moving. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Caro's voice was barely audible. "He's listening." We didn't speak. Even breathing felt dangerous. I kept my eyes on the dark line of trees, trying to pick out shapes. The moon was hidden by cloud. Only the faintest outline of the forest remained. A slow scrape echoed from our right. My blood went cold. Another scrape, closer. "He's climbing the ridge," Jonas said, slowly, testing every foothold. Rourke tightened the grip on his axe. "If he comes up, we hit him together." Jonas shook his head. "If he comes up, we run for the far slope and scatter. It's the only way. He cannot chase many directions at once." "That's suicide," Matteo whispered. "It's survival," Jonas said. "If we stay together, he gets all of us." The scraping grew louder, rhythmic, deliberate. Small stones fell from the ridge's edge, bouncing down the slope behind us. Old Finn backed up until his shoulders hit a boulder. Caro raised a hand. "Get ready, but no one moves until I say." The creature's limb appeared first, pale, jointed, searching over the ridge edge. It tapped the stone, testing it. The claw dug in slightly. The grinding from its mouthparts echoed through the trees. Then another limb appeared, and a third. The weight of its bulk pressed into the ridge. The stone beneath it cracked. It pulled itself higher, inch by inch. Caro steadied his stance. "Wait!" The ridge groaned under the creature's weight. Loose rocks tumbling, soil shifting. A deep crack echoed. The slab beneath the creature broke. The entire ledge collapsed under it. The beast slid backward, limbs scrambling for purchase. It clawed at the ridge, tearing stone loose. Then its massive body toppled, rolling into the forest below with a thunderous crash. Trees snapped, branches shattered, leaves burst into the air. The ground shook for several seconds. Then silence. We waited, breath held, muscles locked, watching the shadowed trees below. Nothing moved. Jonas broke the silence. It fell into the hollow ground. Caro stared into the dark. "Is it dead?" "No," Jonas said, "but it is trapped, maybe for minutes, maybe longer, but not forever." Caro turned to us. "This is our moment. We move now. We get off this island before it climbs out." Rourke grabbed Bram's arm. "Up and on your feet." Old Finn forced himself upright with a grimace. "Tell me we're not running toward the cliffs again." "We're not," Caro said. "We're heading inland, then back toward the far side. Jonas, lead us." Jonas nodded. "There's a narrow run of high ground that will take us across the island. It's dangerous, but it's passable, and the creature won't reach it in time." "Move," Caro ordered. We ran. Branches tore at our arms, roots tried to catch our ankles, the forest floor sloped upward and downward in uneven waves. Jonas guided us with abrupt turns, avoiding low patches of earth and wide gaps between roots. Behind us, after several minutes of sprinting, a distant, faint scrape echoed through the trees. "He's climbing out," Jonas said. "Faster." We pushed harder. My lungs burned with every breath. Sweat froze on my skin. Matteo stumbled once, but Rourke pulled him back to his feet. Bram kept muttering under his breath, but his pace never faltered. At last, the trees thinned ahead. We broke through the final line of trunks and saw the sea. A sheltered cove stretched below us with calmer water than any we had seen on the island. Broken timbers lay scattered at the shoreline. A half-built raft sat in the sand, its ropes intact but weathered. Jonas knelt beside it. "Someone once tried to escape here," he said. "They didn't finish. But we can." Caro dropped to his knees and began fastening the loose bindings. "Everyone, now, lift it." Rourke, Matteo, Old Finn, Bram, Jonas, and I heaved the raft toward the water. The sand resisted at first, then gave way. The wood creaked, but held together. Behind us, across the forest, a distant roar vibrated through the trees. The creature, enraged, free again. "Push!" Caro shouted. We shoved the raft into the shallows. Cold water splashed our legs. We climbed aboard one by one. The raft dipped dangerously, but didn't break. Caro grabbed one of the long poles left by the previous castaway. "Hold on!" We pushed off. The raft lurched into the open water just as another roar echoed across the island. Something massive moved through the forest behind us, snapping trees and flattening brush. But the cove deepened quickly. The current caught us. The raft drifted faster. We watched the island shrink behind us, the treetops bending as something enormous pushed toward the shore. But it was too far, too slow. The creature reached the edge of the cove and stopped. It paced the sand, limbs digging into the earth, unwilling to enter the deeper water. Jonas breathed out. We're past his reach. We drifted further into open sea. No one spoke for a long time. Hours later, when the island was a distant shape on the horizon, Caro finally broke the silence. "No treasure is worth a place like that." Jonas nodded. "Men died there for gold, but we lived because we left it." Old Finn looked back only once. "Good. Let it sink back into the maps of nowhere." Rourke gripped his axe and stared ahead. "Let's get home." The island remained a dark mark on the sea, shrinking behind us until it faded completely. We never returned. We never spoke of it in detail again. But I still hear the grinding of its limbs in quiet nights, and I know the island is still there, waiting for the next crew that wants more than the sea meant to give.